Welcome to Small Thicket, a fairy village full of original characters with whimsical stories that I've brought to life in both traditional art and miniatures. This video will explore the home of Baba Manzana, the elder crone of the village. Our faithful medicine woman lives not in the village proper, but on the outskirts and across the creek to the east in a broad meadow of tall waving grasses and old apple trees. I've drawn the exterior of Baba Manzana's home a handful of times, but the clearest view is an illustration from my unfinished story, Toadapple's Journal. Since I'd drawn this before, doing my concept sketch was pretty straightforward. Baba Manzana's home starts at the base of an old apple tree inside of a long-abandoned fishing creel. Her home is many rooms that stretch from the roots of the trees and up the trunk into the branches, but most of it remains hidden. From the outside, you can see the fishing creel and a large circular window covered with the bottom of an old basket. I knew I wanted to use actual wood for the trunk of her tree, so I dug through my collection of driftwood to find the best piece. I could have easily built the entire tree from foil and wire, but I wanted to incorporate some natural elements too. I've been on a mission to use only what I have in my collection and not acquire more because the hoarding vibes are strong. Once adhered to the base, which is a simple particle board circle torn from some piece of a thrifted decor, I block out rough root shapes with pieces of narrow oak branch, foil, and more hot glue. I needed to carve a large hole for that circular window about halfway up the trunk. I was very focused on remembering to add this and nearly forgot to frame it later on, and you'll see what I mean. Each branch is made from both actual twigs and twisted wires that were drilled into the top of the driftwood for strength and then covered in hot glue and tinfoil to bulk them out a little bit. The naked branches remind me of how absolutely over winter I am, and I am so glad that spring is here finally. Then, to make this hodgepodge of materials seem more cohesive, I covered everything in a texture paste made from matte Mod Podge and cornstarch and baking soda. It's kind of like icing a really lumpy cake. On to the fishing creel basket. Why a fishing creel basket? It's vintage, something from a bygone era, and in my headcanon, the village exists in about the 1960s, which is much more analog of a time than today. So there's less electronics and less plastics than we have, and I read too many books as a kid where mice lived in teapots, and subsequently lots of my characters live in human objects. I used a hunk of insulation foam to carve the basic shape of the creel, and then covered it in a scrap of stiffened mesh that I got from a Stitch Witch friend, because it looked appropriately baskety at this scale. The basket lid and other details were made from recycled paperboard and some random string because this house is full of trash goblins and I am its queen. The painting has begun. I covered the entire tree in a medium muddy brown mixed with a more gray muddy brown to add some variety, and then touched up the base with a burnt umber. Once that layer was totally dry, I used a speed paint to give the entire tree a dark wash. The dark, thin paint settles nicely in the low points and creates a beautiful variance in texture for very little effort. Also, this tree took forever to paint, and getting all those little nooks and tiny areas fully covered, I swear this took me like 3 days, and it's a little embarrassing. Next, I painted up the fishing creel and gave it a simple dry brush in a mustardy yellow color. Okay, so this next part I would most definitely do different next time. But my original idea was to bulk out the areas of the branches that would hold the foliage so I could use less foliage but still get a really full tree in the end. The idea is sound. The approach was, I'm definitely going to do it differently next time, like maybe use like totally tinfoil. Anyway, what I did was I took some jute twine and I wrapped it around the ends of the branches and then secured it with hot glue. This made the branches unexpectedly heavy, and a bunch of the branches ended up cracking under the weight. So I had to go back and secure them afterwards. In case I ended up with any bald spots in the flocking, I then painted the twine a deep green color. I added details to the creel in shades of brown, red, and green. I always see Baba Manzana and her stuff in apple colors for obvious reasons. The front door is supposed to be the wooden part of a mouse trap, so I added the little mouse logo too. A teensy curl of wire makes the doorknob. I added it to the base and gave it a wash with a dark orangey brown to bring out the texture and details. Now here's the tree flockening. I'm using a clump foliage, which is really just bits of foam all stuck to other bits of foam, so it makes clumps. The name is pretty self-explanatory. I used tacky glue instead of hot glue because hot glue, as we've learned, is heavy, and any more extra weight added to these branches could spell catastrophe. Many hours later, I was ready to put some apples on this tree. Baba's tree has fresh, ripe apples growing on it year-round, likely a gift from her old fairy magic. To make them, I decided to add texture paste to a collection of beads so I could get imperfectly shaped apples, because I reasoned that if the apples were too round, it would just look kind of weird. And I reasoned that dipping the beads in texture paste was simpler than hand sculpting each apple. Maybe this was simpler? I don't know. That's just what I wanted to do. I secured each of the beads to a narrow length of floral wire with some super glue and mixed up a thick combo of cornstarch and Mod Podge to get a smooth paste. I dipped each bead into the paste like I was making corn dogs and pushed the wire into some foam to dry. Some I dipped a few times, some just once since I wanted lots of different apple sizes. I painted them with a pale yellow followed by some thin coats of bright green and red to make them look sort of pinky red in the end. I painted the stems brown and twisted a few of the apples together and glued them to the tree, mostly clustered on the bottoms of the leaf bunches like they were hanging and waiting to be plucked for noms. Now, we need to address that window that I definitely almost forgot about, but then didn't. In the concepts and in the room box that I made, the window is in Baba's personal workshop, and then the grating and webbing is the bottom of a woven basket that I cut apart because I loved the shape of it. I decided to weave the basket from sewing thread because I had nothing else in my stash even close to approximating the shape at the scale that I built the tree. I used pins as a base to wind the thread around and secured it with super glue as I went. Admittedly, this was so fiddly, and I ended up remaking it twice because the first one was way too chonk. I'm actually really happy with how this ended up though, and I can easily use this same technique for spider webs in the future. The last order of business was to add some grasses around the base since the apple tree is located in an overgrown meadow. I only had yellow grass, so I used some bright green speed paint to tint it a better color, and it worked out lovely. I glued bundles of the grass to the base with some PVA glue and interspersed some shorter tufts of grass as well to give some variation, and also because I had very little tall grass. Then it was complete. On the eastern outskirts of the village and across the creek, through the tall grasses of the waving meadow and slightly north, there is an old and somewhat forgotten orchard of apple trees that still produce fruit for those who ask. It's been there as long as anyone can remember, and much before that. Baba says trees don't measure time the same way we do, so their answer would confuse me. The oldest and craggiest of trees contains the home and workshop of Baba Manzana. This is where Baba has always been and always will be. Some say she was planted in the ground and from her grew the apple trees. Others say she was born of a blossom in place of a fruit. Regardless of her origin, she is our elderest crone, healer, teacher, soothsayer, and makes a delicious cup of tea. Whatever you need, Baba is here to advise. Unless she's napping, which is the only thing she takes seriously after this many seasons. Thank you to everyone for watching, and please be sure to subscribe to my channel. If you want more lore and more art, please visit smallthicket.com, or you can find me on Instagram or join my Patreon. See you next time.